Brodes Media.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome on into Schmoozed. We are joined by the one and only Russ Joy of the biggest Flyers pod in the world, Snow The Goalie. What's up, dude?
Living the best life that I could possibly live. Enjoying myself. Enjoying hosting the number one pregame, intermission, and postgame show, The Side of the Mississippi, the Press Row Show. And, of course, we're on the Flyers podcast.
Right.
Snow The Goalie.
Right.
Yeah. It's weird. It's been like 5.5 years we've been doing that show, but nobody's like thought to start another one. It's very, very weird. You know?
Well, look, it's definitely not me. I haven't talked about the Flyers since November 22nd. So that means
for shame.
I have to catch up on that Rangers Black Friday game. I got the whole thing. The odd man rushes, Joel Farabee getting benched. I do appreciate everyone reaching out, though, saying, Brodes, I need some Flyers hockey talk. I apologize. The birds have been running my brain for a while. But look, they just swept the Penguins on the good old home and home. Where do you stand right now looking at this hockey team with Torts saying they got balls?
Yeah, they got some balls.
Yeah,
so I'm pretty much in the same place that I've been with this team since the start of the year, which is from a macro view, the best thing for this team long-term is to get as much elite top-end talent as possible. And I have not wavered from that. However, there are a few things that have kind of happened over the course of the season that haven't moved the goalposts at all or haven't like totally changed things entirely for me. But in talking to a few people who do actual evaluation, scouting, looking at the draft class coming up, the consensus across the board right now is that there are no generational talents in the 2024 draft, and that realistically the top three guys are kind of a tier of their own, which is we think these guys have star potential, not superstar, not franchise cornerstone potential. And then numbers 4 through, let's say, 18, there's really no massive difference. So I'm not going to sit here and say, yes, I would like to see the Flyers be a bubble playoff team, or yes, I'd like to see them compete down the stretch for the 8th seed in the conference. However, if it were to happen, if things go really sideways and this team somehow makes a push towards the playoffs, I can pretty confidently say from the people who are better at scouting things, a year in advance than I am, that they seem to believe there is not a massively deep, high-end, top part of the draft that you'd be missing out on. It's very different from the 2023 draft. That's one part. That said, you have to enjoy when they win. Like, they pull out an overtime win against the Penguins. They sweep a back-to-back, a home and home, against your hated Pittsburgh Penguins. And like I saw people on our stream immediately after the game complaining that they won the game because it's going to take them out of the top 10.
Right.
That's a little bit silly.
Yeah,
in the moment. It's a little bit silly.
I agree with you, and this is why I wanted to bring you on, because you have another side of it that I don't. I'm just the giddy jerk-off, right? I'm just reality, and even though I'm excited about the future and Mitch Koff and Cutter Gauthier and all that, I'm loving it, but I'm also enjoying that. Hey, if they're the bubble team that gets in, let's go, baby. Tell me Sean Walker pulling off a toey in the first round of the postseason and rips it twine wouldn't be electric. Like, that's where I'm at right now, and yeah. I'm enjoying it. But it's weird because I say I'm enjoying it, yet then I remember Saturday afternoon in Pittsburgh, in the first 40 minutes, I wanted to blow my brains out. But then the final third, I'm like, hey, this is great. But it's like, all jokes aside, I play that card. I do feel that way. But it's like I'm watching Tyson Forster. All right, he's winning puck battles, and now he's just beating goalies clean. No screens, no tips. It's just straight up wristers on the power play. Yep. I'm enjoying it. That's all. That's
well, like here. So let's add. I'm gonna untether here. All right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna just take some of that energy. Right. I just had my coffee here in the afternoon.
Hey, I just picked up my second.
Oh, you know what? Today's Tuesday. It's free Wawa coffee.
Come on.
What am I doing?
Come on.
I went and brewed myself a pot. What am I doing here? All right. Here's the good thing. All right. I'm gonna be positive. I'm gonna be a positive Pete for a second. Okay.
Good.
So, in years past, when I have hopped on to other shows, I've almost been like the Grim Reaper. I've been the one who's had to like come on and like issue a dose of reality because, for the most part, the last few years, when Fletcher Mort, we shall not say his name, When he was in power, he gaslit the fans and told them like, well, you just have to wait until Sean Couturier comes back in December. You just have to wait till Cam Atkinson comes back. And he knew full well they weren't going to come back, especially last year. He just gaslit the fan base. He lied to them and said, like, this is going to be a playoff team. Just wait, just wait, just wait. And, like, it never was. And anybody who understood what they were watching knew that, like, last year's team especially was not a playoff team. It was going to be a bottom 10 team. And yet he made moves to try to get them closer to being a bubble threat. But again, they had no shot. There was no chance. And so I used to have to, like, when I'd pop on, people would be like, oh, man, this, like, is going to bring down. He's like Russ Joyless was the thing, right? And there's an account on Twitter that, like, occasionally has, like, a poop emoji. And, like, they'll occasionally, like, post stuff. And it'll be like, Ross Joyless. And they'd be like, why are you so negative? I'm like, because I know what I'm watching. I know what I'm seeing. And here's the thing. This year, regardless of where you land on, are they playing the kids enough? Are they doing what they need to do long term? Tyson Foerster's a perfect example of a guy that they have given a ton of rope to, and now it's starting to bear some fruit. Foerster's game when he was drafted was he's got a great shot. He's going to be fantastic at ripping that puck and putting it in the back of the net eventually. But he has all these other facets of his game to work on. And this season, all those other facets came to fruition before he started finding the back of the net. And if there's something to be encouraged about, it's that he's right now a much more well-rounded NHL player than they expected him to be at this point. And now that has allowed him, and him staying in the lineup when others have gotten brought out, him being able to remain in the lineup as much as he has, appears to have given him the confidence boost that now you're starting to see that shot. Now you're starting to see what they drafted him to be. You combine that with down the line, if he continues to progress, and if Cutter Gauthier is a real player with a real shot who can make that work at the NHL level, and you bring over a Matvei Mishkov at some point in the next 3 years, a guy who's averaging over a point a game in the KHL at like 18 years of age, you put all those things together, and all of a sudden, dude, instead of this being, oh shit, we've got, am I allowed to curse? I think I'm allowed. You said jerk off before. So
Come on,
we're going to count it.
Now.
Like, instead of having to spend years going, well, I wish Claude Giroux would shoot the puck more. I wish Jake Voracek would shoot the puck more.
This is where we draw the line. You don't come into my show and start talking blab about my guy.
I'm not. I'm saying that people would say we want to see him shoot more because we need him to score some goals. Same thing with Voracek. You had two pacifists.
I got triggered.
And I know you have. You have Giroux derangement syndrome. Very sad. Anyway, so like. You now have guys who can actually shoot the puck. Like, in theory, you have guys who can find the back of the net. This team hasn't had that. The last time they had a legitimate sniper was Jeff Carter.
Yeah. And I watched him play on, yesterday night?
Yeah, and started the overtime.
Crazy.
The husk, the animated corpse of Jeff Carter outplaying on the fourth line.
Still kicking it. But wait, were you an anti-Torch should lead the charge, or were you pro-Torch lead the charge?
Oh, I very much don't think that John Tortorella is the coach for a rebuild.
I remember you saying that. But
I don't view him as a what's that?
Like Tyson Foerster, right? The whole thing of him playing the right way and him pushing the right buttons there. Is that a defining individual that you could look at and say, well, what John Tortorella does well helped improve him, and there's a correlation between the two? Or are you looking at it as maybe that's Tyson Foerster and he would have done that anyway, or Sean Couturier maybe is helping him out with the two-way side of it? Like, where do you stand with that? Because I give Torch credit. He pushed the right buttons. That's his job.
I'm more on the player has the intrinsic motivation to make himself better, and it certainly helps that you have veterans back in the lineup like a Couturier. Like that can't be overstated. That's a big part of it.
Sure.
And when you have a guy like Cam Atkinson who's back and is available at practice and is like a good leader on and off the ice, I think that helps as well. I think that what you've now found here, by virtue of some of the departures on the team, is that this locker room is better suited to cultivate a positive locker room and a work ethic that can be found across the team. They had at least one guy who was an active deterrent from multiple reports. And then they had another guy who, like, the team just did not like, and that multiple people on the team just flat out did not like. Those guys are both gone, and now there are actual opportunities for some of these young guys to kind of find their legs. If I'm going to give Torts credit for something, it's that It's hard. It really is. I look back at his track record, and this is a thing that I've kind of beat the drum about. You cannot find multiple instances of him taking a guy that wasn't drafted ridiculously high overall and turning him into a star player. And I know that a lot of that is it falls on the player themselves. Like, do they have the talent or not? To me, he's not a rebuild guy. He's not a guy that I think is going to be coaching this team when they're ready to take that next step. I would expect that he's going to be moved into another role, probably within the organization as an advisor or something in 3 years or so. I could be wrong. If they start winning, if they make the playoffs this year, if they then, I don't know, go out and they entertain some free agents in the next couple of years and like they turn this thing a little bit faster than they expected, well, I think he'll stick around. If this ends up being what we think it'll probably be, which is the wheels will fall off around the trade deadline because they've got a really wicked schedule after the deadline, and they end up in like the bottom 10 again, and they're drafting in the lottery, and you do this again, and the next year you maybe offload some of the vets and all that, I'm not sure that he's going to be here in 3 years. I'll give him the credit in that he is letting some of these guys play. And even when he's popping a couple of them out of the lineup, like a Bobby Brink, they come back in, and you're doing what any veteran coach I think would do with some of these young guys. Like when they are struggling, you take them out, you send them up to the press box, let them kind of decompress, let them watch it from the high view, get a better idea of how they fit in, and then let them go back in and play. So,
yeah,
I don't want to be like branded as the Torts hater here. I just don't know that there's something he's doing himself that's making a Tyson Forster better.
Okay, so you're just in the mindset of it's a lot on the players, which I stand on that for 99% of sports anyway. But I have no issue with Torts, and I'm not one of those guys. Like, I see some people running around Flyers Twitter every single night. They're dissecting the lineup and, well, Brink's out and this and that. It's like, okay, well, Morgan Frost needs a little bit of time, and someone has to sit. Well, why can't it be Delory? Listen, you're not going to put that guy on the fourth line. Like, you're driving yourself crazy for nothing. There's 82 games. And I brought this up in the past before, and by no means am I going to compare D3 NCAA hockey to the NHL. We don't get paid millions of dollars like that. But I was in and out of the lineup, and there's something to be said. If I'm scratched for 6 straight games, like you finally get back, you got to make sure the guys that are in and out of the lineup still have a role that's meaningful. So if it's a back-to-back and Nick Sealer's out, and I know Belpedio's not here anymore, but I'm just saying, if you put him in the lineup there, like, those guys need to play too. Like, you can't just run the same lineup out every single day. I have no issue with the way that he's done some of it. Now, he might be a little harsh with the benching of Joel Farabee the entire game. I don't know if it need to be the entire game after taking, the no back and stuff.
And especially after Garnet Hathaway was thrown out of the game.
Exactly. You're down a forward already.
You're already down 1, and now you've effectively crippled your team's chance of winning that game because now you're playing with 10 forwards. Like that was a game where I went, all right, if you're going to try to send the message to Joel Farabee, that probably isn't the one. Even though he had kind of gone that way, and it appeared like he was going to just put him on bellhop duty, as I called it, getting the door for everyone coming off the ice. Like, at some point, you do kind of have to pivot. You know, because I think that if the wins and losses matter, which Torts has said a bunch of times they do, I don't think it's fair to the other guys, to the other 10 healthy forwards on the team, that they've got to go out now. They're making up for 2. One who got thrown out on a call that might have been a major, but certainly not a game misconduct, especially because Hughes came back into that game and scored the winner. But also just because, like, it's not fair to have a physically able-bodied human being who actually does have some skill and a good nose for goal and not play him, especially later in that game when he was needed.
Yeah, and he knows, too. Come on, Joel Farabee screwed up. But that was right after, I guess, the whole debacle against the Rangers and all the odd man rushes. But this is what upset me a little bit about Torch with that whole debacle, is if you're going to preach, we're going to let our defensemen join the rush and we're going to create this havoc offensively and try and produce because – you don't have the traditional snipers probably to do it yourself. So that's just come in waves, right? Well, at some point, you got to recognize the flaw of that will be there'll be 2-on-1s. There'll be 3-on-2s. And when it's top echelon talent, it might end up in the back of your net to sit somebody when you kind of know your philosophy, which I agree with the philosophy, but you know that there's a back end to it that might hurt you. you have to take some and give some there. I'm just saying it was a little harsh in that department. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I could see the merit of it. Like, I could see the merit of the argument there. I think that the thing that I sat back and I was like, this just isn't good, is the Frost benching for as long as it was, and the fact that it was multiple times that Frost was out of the lineup and it felt very arbitrary. Like, you couldn't point to there were a couple of games where, like, I would make a joke. Like, we would be watching the game up outside of what we call the Snow The Goalie sportsbook in Wells Fargo Center.
Love that.
And we'd be watching it, and like I forget which game it was, but like he didn't go hard into the corner for a puck. He kind of like backed in, and you're like, well, that's not going to go over well with Torts. And I made the joke. I was like, well, fuck it, he's out of the lineup next game. And like, sure as shit, the next game he's out of the lineup, and you go like, is that really it? Is that all it takes to get this guy out? And we go back and forth because Bundy and I think, view Frost in a pretty similar way. And Anthony's like very anti what Frost could be. He just doesn't believe that the guy can be a better than average NHL player. And my thought is always like, look, you need skill. This team is hurting on the skill front. He's one guy who has, I would say, Frost has elite vision. I think he processes the game pretty well. But he does make stupid mistakes. Definitely. He's also quasi young. Like, people don't like hearing that because he's 24, but he's been in the league for a few years. And like, when it feels like a guy is older than he actually is, people are like willing to give up on him so quickly. And I come back and I go, all right, if we are going to have all these young snipers, right? If Forster and if Gauthier and if a Mishkov are going to be able to fill the net, somebody has to get them the puck, right? And I'm not so sure that it's going to be a 35-year-old Sean Couturier at that point. And like, you are going to need somebody to feed these guys. Whether it's Frost or not, I don't know. But I'm not entirely convinced that sitting a guy for 6 games on an arbitrary decision is what gets him to figure it out. I think he needs to play. Noah Cates' injury, unfortunate for him, is like the one, I would say, final chance that Morgan Frost has in Philadelphia to prove that, like, the way that Torts is viewing him and the way that the organization as a whole, that includes Briere and Jonesy, because they're not going to sign off on Torts sitting him for 6 straight games unless they're also in agreement. Like, he can prove that there is merit to keeping him here and to playing him. And if not, all right, well, then you've given it your all, and now it's time to find him a new home.
I thought it was a little too much for that one, too, because I think it's Bill Melcher, right? He's the one who's like a diehard Morgan Frost supporter nonstop. I think he made an excellent point, though, that, okay, he might have made some mistakes, but he went out there and he blocked 4 shots that night. And, that's something where I think if Tortorella can pick up on the details in the smaller parts of the game, especially blocking shots, right? I mean, that's what Torts hockey's all about. But if you can see the smaller details in Forster and say, well, the goal scoring will come, why can't you give a little more leash to someone like Morgan Frost, who may turn the puck over at the blue line, but he's also selling his body for the boys and getting the puck out of the zone? That needs to be appreciated too. I'm in between you and Bundy and Ant, probably. Like, I don't know if it'll ever work out here, but when he does have those flashy plays, I'm like, damn, Morgan Frost has the skill. His stick handling's amazing. He'll try passes. He's in the doghouse and he'll try a pass in between his legs. Like, he is willing to do that, which I appreciate because that's him. But then with that, it'll send someone on a breakaway because he's trying to thread the needle at the top of the blue line. You go, how can you be so extreme from the high skill to the put my team in a bad position?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a big part of this, too, is that Frost had a good end of last season for the most part. The question was, is he only putting up points against teams that aren't very good? And like, yes, shocker, it is surprising to some that it is harder to put up points against playoff teams. But like, the fact remains, like, either you show up against those good teams or you don't. And like, he clearly didn't build enough equity with Tortorella last year to buy himself more of an opportunity, or to buy himself let's say a departure from the Chateau Bow Wow, as Bundy likes to call it, from the doghouse. Like, he didn't do it. Now, he has the chance, once again, to kind of go blank slate, sort of, with Torts. Prove it again. Like, prove yourself now with Cates out. Otherwise, they will call forwards up. Like, I will not be surprised if they call a few guys up here in the next week or so. And, like, if a Frost is going out and he's trying the between-the-leg pass when you're down 2 goals, well, then Morgan Frost is probably going to sit. But we'll see.
We will see. All right, so before we get to Carter Hart and Sanheim, did you hear the call on the radio of the Sean Couturier overtime goal?
Couturier to Couturier, and Couturier has the puck, and he scores!
How does that happen? Look, I love listening to the radio broadcast. I got no problem with it. Growing up, my dad always had it on. It hits me a certain type of way. But for that to be the call is amazing. It's comical. It's great, though. We love Saunders. He's great. But,
so I don't know how it happened. It was funny, though. I mean, I cracked up because I saw it this morning, and I was like, man, come on. Like, we got Couturier to Couturier to Couturier to Couturier. I'm like, shit, man, Couturier is all over the place. Like, I knew that he was coming back from the back.
First off, let's give props to Sanheim for, I guess, making that play happen, saying, hey, I'm going to rim it. We're going to get it. Well, I think I heard someone say that he didn't even, when he talked about it post-game, he didn't even know that it would be an odd man rush. He just thought maybe he can send TK rolling. But wow, what a draw by Coots, though. Coots didn't skip a beat. Is that fair to say that he just looks like a guy who had a little hammy and came back instead of a back problem? I tweaked my ankle. All right, we're good to go again. Or no, is this my giddy self? Am I going too far?
This is your giddy self going a little bit too far.
Come on, give some respect to Coots.
All right, so here's the thing. Love Sean Couturier. Great player. He has had moments where you watch him play and he looks every bit like the player that we're used to seeing. You watch him, I know this was earlier in the season, but you watch him just absolutely shut down Connor McDavid early in the season. And the one shift that he doesn't play, McDavid gets an assist, and you go, son of a bitch. There are other games where if you're watching Couturier, and this is like the beauty, and you understand this, but like the beauty of watching it from where we watch the game, and when you watch it live versus when you're watching on TV and you can't see as everything's happening by the benches and you're seeing how guys are getting on and off the ice, how they seem to feel, all that at the end of a shift. There are times when you watch Couturier in these games, specifically early in the game, where it looks like he's got a piano on his back because you have to loosen up, right? And like, I think it does take him longer now to get himself physically back into game shape, if that makes sense, within the game itself. He tends to come on really strong by the second period. Third period, he looks like himself, and then you see overtime last night. Yeah, he looked like Sean Couturier. I think it's always going to be hard for him. For better or worse, it's going to be hard because a back injury like he had is just, it's not a career ender, but it's certainly a career alterer. And if you're able to overcome the fact that he might not look totally like himself in the first period, but you can get 2 solid periods out of him, then you're in good shape. And if you're able to continue to put him in good spots where he can kind of play off his wingers in a way that they're also playing a responsible 200-foot game, you're not putting it all on him to kind of be the be-all, end-all for that first line. And I think that they're putting him in positions to be successful right now. It's not 100% Sean Couturier, but if you get 80%, 85% of Sean Couturier, that's still a top-line center on most teams.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And what you can do is if the first period is a little quiet, find Sean Walker.
The number one defenseman that the Flyers needed was one that they acquired in a trade that they never expected to bear fruit.
Now, call me crazy. I was a Belpedio guy.
Well,
Give me a little Belpedio. Guy joins the rush, scored a couple bingos. What are we doing here putting him on waivers? What are we doing?
Belpedio's fine. They wanted him to get through waivers. I didn't look to see today if he got claimed or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think they thought he was going to clear waivers. And I think they want to keep him. I think that this just kind of came down to the numbers game. And with Risto coming back, tricky. Now I will say this is fodder. All right. There were a lot of scouts in attendance last night.
Oh.
There were 2 scouts from Toronto last night.
Oh.
Now, you might think to yourself, I'm going to do like the Brian Windhorst. Now, why would they do that? Why would they do that? It's interesting because they've always been looking for defensive help. They're always looking for help on the blue line. And over the last year and a half, they've made inquiries about Travis Sanheim. And at this point, Sanheim has recently, I think, kind of regressed again. He's had kind of a roller coaster year. There are times where you watch Sanheim and you go, all right, dude's starting to look like the guy we remember from a few years ago, where he looked like the actual number 1 defenseman, not the other guy. Whatever his name. I don't remember his name. What was his name? Ivan Drago. What was his name? I don't even remember. It doesn't matter. But if he dies, he dies. But Toronto always wants help. I can't imagine that the Flyers are looking to trade Travis Sanheim. I think that they view him as he added 13 pounds of muscle in the offseason. They still believe that he can develop himself into being a top pair or at worst, top defenseman on a second pair. And that over the next few years, as the cap goes up, his cap percentage is going to decrease. And you're going to look at that deal in 3 years and say, hey, this is actually a pretty okay deal. There are a lot of ifs and buts in that. I do have a question, though, about if Toronto is interested in a defenseman, who else would they look at? If they're not going to part with Sanheim, who could they look at that they might be interested in? Are they sending 2 scouts to look at Sean Walker?
No, but could it be Cam York? Or is it just Rasmus? Or is it Mark Stahl at the deadline?
I can't imagine you're going to send 2 scouts to watch Mark Stahl.
I agree with you.
I think everybody knows what Mark Stahl is. And I don't think Mark Stahl's had a very good season for the Flyers, but like you look at a playoff team is going to want to bring that guy in to be the 7th defenseman and to bring leadership and know-how in the postseason. And like if needed, he can rotate in. And like you know what you're getting there. But the York thing or Ristolainen would be very interesting. I can't fathom that the team is willing to give up on Cam York already. I'm not impressed by what I see. I don't think that he's got the killer mentality that you need. He can develop it.
Second line guy.
I think he's a third guy.
Ooh,
but like
disappointing. But yeah.
Well, you know, it kind of is as currently constructed, right? And going off of what he's presented to you so far, he's a third pair guy. At best, he's a second pair guy on a bad team like this. But like he needs to develop the mentality of somebody who's going to rip the jugular out. They need him to find that. Or they at least need him to be assertive. When he's assertive, he does make smart plays with the puck. When he lets the game come to him and he's not actively chasing after things, then he's kind of caught flat-footed and you kind of shake your head. And that's happened a lot. So we'll see. The Risto thing would be interesting, though. Like, could Toronto look to make a big money move for Rasmus Ristolainen? Maybe.
I'm thinking what that fan base would react like. Toronto, that is. If they get Risto, I'm sure they would start getting roasted, don't you think?
100%. However, like, if you need blue line help, you know how guys are in this league, like how GMs in this league think. They like the idea of the big physical defenseman. They like the idea of having that guy in the lineup and him potentially deterring hits from the other team or cheap shots from the other team. He doesn't exactly play a game that I think is advantageous to a postseason contender. If you're the Flyers and you get an actual offer, and that offer isn't like retain 50% of the salary, I think you have to pull the trigger on it. I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters what's coming back. Truthfully, like the only way that you don't look to make that kind of move is if I haven't looked at Toronto's thing. I could pull up Cap Friendly, but like if you're saying, all right, Risto's got 5 years left on that deal, whatever it is, I don't want to take back a bad contract for 3 years unless there's a good pick attached to it. Because then you say, all right, 3 years from now is when we think Mishkov's going to be here. We're going to be ready to kind of flip the switch on things. Like, all right, then maybe. But you don't want to trade a bad contract for another bad contract. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
A 1 or 2 year commitment's fine because then you also have the expiring contract in the last year. But it is interesting. I'm going to keep an eye on it, though. I can promise you that as these games happen, I'm going to keep an eye on which scouts are in attendance because you know this, but like it does tell a story. It was Arizona 2 years ago, 3 years ago. They sent like 3 or 4 scouts to a couple of games. And then eventually they were a team that was interested in Shane Gostisbehere. It happens. Like the fans don't get to see that. It's really not supposed to be for public consumption to like take a picture of the screen. I saw somebody did that. And like, I'm sure they're not going to get slapped by the Flyers, but at some point somebody might say something. But like, you're allowed to note what you see in attendance on that board. That does tell you something though about what could be coming down the pipe.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, well, we'll end on this just because you mentioned Gostisbehere, and for some reason this pisses me off, and social media shouldn't do this to me sometimes, but it does. The whole like this organization ruin Ghost. I just feel like sometimes people need a new voice. Like, first off, he's on another team again. He's got a role. He's a third pairing power play specialist kind of defenseman. He's been in the league now for what, like 7-8 years. The guy's been around a little bit. Sometimes you just need to get out of a spot and find something fresh. And kudos to him. He went to Arizona. He was able to play a free game, not worry about winning a bunch. Just go out there. Plus, minus, who gives a hell? Why are people sick in the head? Maybe that's a bad question considering, that could be a little. Though.
You have GDS.
Just
so
a
like,
little.
let's not forget, we let off the show. You got your Giroux derangement syndrome. But listen, people, for whatever reason, they sometimes get themselves glommed on to a player. They believe that player is better than they actually are. And then they go to battle for it, right? I mean, listen, dude, we're not gonna relitigate Claude Giroux here, okay? But there are people, perhaps like you, who would put Giroux in the same category as a Sidney Crosby, and he's not.
No.
Okay, but there are people who will fight to the death on Twitter that the Flyers never gave Claude Giroux the kind of weapons that Pittsburgh did. They're not the same player. They don't belong in the same conversation. He was like a tier below, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But there are people who go to the death. They will fight tooth and nail for that. And then there are people who will Morgan Frost. We had the same thing, right? Anytime we were doing Press Row Show, we get all these comments in from people who are you have the people who are Morgan Frost is the second coming, and then you have people who are Morgan Frost is a dog shit player who belongs in the AHL, or then you get some people who are kind of like me, who are hey, this guy's probably a 60-point player, but probably going to have better success going somewhere starting over instead of trying to make it work here where the coach clearly doesn't like him. The thing is, Shane Gostisbehere, all right? People got really excited because Ghost had a couple of seasons where he put up a lot of points, and we weren't used to it because defensemen aren't point-scoring guys when they wear the orange and black, because you're used to the muckers and grinders and the big-bodied defensemen and the Darian Hatchers of the world, right? And so when you had this, good puck-moving defenseman who could find the back of the net, it got people excited. However, it wasn't exactly in line with reality. There's a reason that he's been moved so many times. Is he a good defenseman on a bad team kind of player? Yep. Is he a competent quarterback on a power play? Yep. Is he a good even strength defenseman? Nope.
No.
Is he somebody that any rational Stanley Cup contending team would want to have on their defensive core, especially entering the postseason? Nope.
No, not logging in minutes. Nope.
And there's a reason for that. And by the way, it's not because he's holding out in free agency to get some massive money deal and is saying hey, only the bottom feeders are after me. When he was moved, let us not forget, when Fletcher Mort traded him along with picks just to get his money off the books, they were trying to actively engage multiple teams and no one wanted him.
They also did that and then brought in Tony DeAngelo and traded for his rights, which is basically the same exact player. Same player.
Very similar player with, a lot of question marks. And that one also didn't work out.
No.
And there's a reason for it. And it's fine. And the people who, like to wear their Ghost Bear shirts with the 2 emojis, I could get it. Those people, lovely people, okay? Great people. But we got to be real. And I don't know who that guy is going to be. We know that at some point the fans are going to get ridiculously behind somebody who's not as good as they were told he was going to be. I wouldn't even say Frost is that guy. I'm going to actively try to come up with who the person is, because I would have thought it would have been a Cam York, but I don't even think Cam York has Cam York hasn't done it at the NHL level yet, racking up the points where you say all right, that's our guy. I'm not sure who that guy is on this team.
Could it have been Noah Cates after his first year? Or is that not sexy enough because he's not a point guy? He's just a stylistic
I don't think it's a sexy enough thing. I don't think it's a sexy enough play.
It's not. Only real sicko hockey heads would appreciate his play.
Yeah, exactly. Two-way play, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, good stick check on a 2-on-1. That's good stuff.
But I don't know who the guy is because I don't. Stop.
No, Jody Mack had me on yesterday at midnight after Monday Night Football. And he goes, I got one guy I just love to death. And I'm like, oh, Jesus. I start throwing out random names. Sean Walker, of course. He gives me Nick Seeler. He goes, I don't think there's anybody else in this city that loves Nick Seeler like me. I said, yeah, there's one. John Tortorella.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's just you two. But
Yep.
yeah, so that's where that's where, all jokes aside though, casuals who are now watching this team, not that he's a casual, I mean he's a Jody Max also, but I'm just saying hockey guy compared to let's tune in.
Yep.
They go to Nick Seeler. That's where their eyes are drawn to, like he'll muck it up in front of the blue paint. But anyway, I didn't expect us to go into the whole Nick Seeler side of it. We're going to wrap things up here because my mind's on the Eagles.
I don't recognize that team. Can you who were they?
I'm broken. They broke me.
Are they the ones who ripped the heart out of our chest? That team? The team that allowed and watched as Deebo Samuel talked shit for 10 months, or 9 months, and then practically no-showed. That team?
I'd rather build my
the team that the head coach decided that our franchise quarterback, the most important person on the team, just got out of concussion protocol. Fuck it, let's throw him back in a 2-score game. And then, after falling behind by 3 scores, said, we're going to send him back out, and we're also going to put DeAndre Swift in a position where he almost got decapitated. That's fine.
You forgot this, though. They don't give up. That was a statement. We don't quit. Oh, yeah, hold on. I think your linebackers quit on you about 45 minutes ago there, Nick. Anyway,
in fact, but in fairness, those guys stink, and it's not their fault. They are who they are. This is where I get a little bit angry because Howard Roseman, right, who I always went after about institutional arrogance for neglecting certain positions. The 2 positions I was always on him about, linebacker and wide receiver. He's now built a great receiving core. He's got arguably the best wide receiver duo outside of maybe Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. However, he doesn't understand that there's a position to be played between the defensive backs and the line. And when you're playing a team like San Francisco that's got guys who can go underneath like Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel, you need a freaking linebacker. Sorry.
It's the truth. It's the truth. And I'm a big Howie guy. But that's a huge concern. You can't go into the year with Nakobe Dean. We can't do this. I'd sit here all day and my wife would get mad. Russ Joy, Snow the Goalie, all the stuff's going to be tagged and linked, and you go do that and watch Flyer stuff because there's only one Flyer show in this market. Damn it.
That's right.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm just going to end it there.